The first wide receiver off the board in the 2023 NFL draft is Jaxon Smith-Njigba. We expected that to happen, but we didn't expect him to go to Seattle. Seattle's got DK Metcalf. They've got Tyler Lockett. Now they've got Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Heath Cummings, your thoughts on what it means for the 2023 season?
I like the player a lot. I borderline love the player. I'm not having an easy time processing this landing spot from either a redraft or a dynasty perspective. That you mentioned it. They've got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. It's hard to imagine they are going to have three starter-worthy fantasy wide receivers. So for his rookie season, I think he's probably depends on an injury to make a huge fantasy impact. And long term, they've got a 34, 35-year-old quarterback and no one to replace him for the future. So I think once Lockett's gone, he can slide in next to Metcalf, be that number 2 wide receiver that's almost as good as DK, as long as the quarterback situation's fixed.
Look, I love that the Seahawks offense has so many weapons and that now they've committed to 2 pass catching weapons in Metcalf and Smith-Njigba for the foreseeable future. And of course, Kenneth Walker's in that backfield. And so it's going to be tough for defenses to deal with all these moving parts. But isn't the MO of Pete Carroll, as long as he's the head coach of the Seahawks, to run the football? That's something that he's talked about for a long time. So I'm kind of frustrated with this landing spot, Heath. I don't like it at all for redraft. This is one of the worst possible landing spots that I think Smith-Njigba could have had. Great talent, just like you said. Really great slot receiver. Might be stuck in the slot for the majority of his rookie year. And so I think he's going to end up being a bench receiver in fantasy and probably somebody that you're not even going to think about until round 9 or round 10. And worst of all, because we think he's a talented receiver, and even though he's not going to get a ton of targets playing behind Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, he should take away a decent amount of opportunity from Metcalf and Lockett. I think it's bad for Metcalf and bad for Lockett. Real quick, where are you drafting DK and Lockett now that Smith-Njigba is there?
Yeah, I gave a slight downgrade to those two, but I still think like they don't have a whole lot of people to throw the ball to. I had them projected at 25 and 22% target share. Now I've dropped it down to 24 and 21%. DK is still a top 25 wide receiver for me. He's at 20th, and I've got Tyler Lockett at 27th. So maybe a round 4 pick for DK Metcalf and maybe closer to round 6 for Tyler Lockett. And I definitely think, like, if you look at the projection right now for JSN, not sure he's going to be a top 60 wide receiver by the projection, but the upside that he has if something happens to Metcalf or Tyler Lockett means that we're going to draft him much higher than what he's projected for. I think I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up as a round 8 pick.
So if you draft Lockett in round 6 and JSN in round 8 or round 9, are you kind of baking yourself in to having a rock solid low end number 2, high end number 3 receiver for the balance of the season?
Well, I think the upside's more than that. I mean, it could be that Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are unaffected by this move, and JSN has to find his own targets, and Tyler Lockett remains the high end number 2 wide receiver that he's been for most of the last 5 years when we've discounted him. And I think if something happened to Lockett, it's possible you could see JSN seeing the same number of targets that Lockett's seen the last couple of years, and again, being a high end number 2. So I think maybe, yeah, you're locking in that low end number 2 upside, but you're one injury away from possibly having more upside than that.
Okay, let's make this a little less depressing and talk long-term, talk dynasty. We know that DK Metcalf's going to be around for several years, but Tyler Lockett's 31 years old, may not be on the Seahawks by this time next year. That would be a good thing for Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Certainly would open up targets for him. Can you make the case for JSN to be the number 1 receiver taken in rookie-only drafts?
Oh, you can right now because he doesn't have any competition. Like, let's see. We've seen wide receiver falling all the way to to number 20 before the first wide receiver went. Does that mean we're getting a run of 4 or 5 wide receivers at the end of round 1? Or does that mean that people don't think in the NFL don't think this wide receiver class is very good? If he's the only wide receiver taken in round 1, he's definitely the first receiver to be taken in rookie drafts. We'll see if somebody ends up in the Chargers, somebody ends up maybe on the Giants or the Chiefs. Would not be surprised now if someone leaps him. But for now, I think probably a low-end number 2 wide receiver in Dynasty.
And just a lesson that I can tell you that I learned last year. Heath, you and I were big fans of Garrett Wilson before he was drafted to the Jets. And I'll speak for myself because I think you feel differently. When Wilson went to the Jets, I was nervous about what it meant for his future, not just because of the other receivers that the Jets had. And it's not like they had great receivers, but because of the situation he was in. The offense figured to be a little more run heavy. Certainly Zach Wilson at quarterback was somebody that I wasn't sure of. But if you had simply bet on talent in your dynasty draft, you would have taken Garrett Wilson toward the top of your rookie-only drafts, and you would be feeling so good about that right now. And I think Smith-Njigba is a great talent. We've already talked about on the show. Great quickness out of his routes, great hands. He's been a wide receiver for as long as he's been alive practically. And I think that he could eventually have that talent pay off for fantasy managers. So don't poo-poo him just because his situation is going to be ugly in 2023. Might be a sneaky good top 5 or 6 pick in rookie-only drafts with 1 quarterback, probably closer to 9 or 10 in 2 quarterbacks. Check out all of our other videos here on YouTube, Fantasy Football Today. Like and subscribe so you get a leg up on your competition in 2023 and beyond.